Hey everyone, welcome to the Nature Discovery Center's third video for Palooza, where Bel Air celebrates getting outdoors and getting involved with plants. Today, we are going to talk about pollinators, and you can see a pollinator right here in our wildflower garden in front of the house. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the whole park. We have planted a ridiculous number of native wildflowers in this wildflower garden. And of course, we have specifically planted it here for wildlife, for pollinators like this. Now, I keep using the word pollinator. What does pollinator mean? Pollinators are animals, I know these aren't real, are animals that pollinate flowers, right? Flowers are basically the reproductive structures of plants. Plants make flowers so that those flowers can get pollinated and they can make seeds. And seeds are, of course, baby plants, right? So animals that help a flower pass pollen from one flower to another, those are pollinators. And I bet you could think of a few pollinators right now. Hummingbirds, bees, butterflies. These are animals that get nectar from the flowers. That is a reward that the plant offers the pollinator. And in exchange, of course, the pollinator goes and drinks some nectar from the flower. And as it goes in there, it gets pollen all over itself. Of course, the pollinator, the animal, doesn't usually know that. And it goes from one flower to another. And it carries that pollen unwittingly to another flower. And once that pollen makes it to another flower that is the same species of flower, that plant can now reproduce. And so there are a wide variety of pollinators besides just the ones we just looked at. Bats can pollinate. There are some plants in parts of the world that are pollinated by rodents on the ground, by lizards. Right here in our wildflower garden, there are beetles and wasps and flower flies and ants, and sometimes ladybugs do it accidentally when they're trying to get prey out of the bottom of a flower, as well as all the different kinds of bees and butterflies, and if you're out here at night, maybe moths. One of the things that I want to bring to your attention is that you might notice, and you probably already have noticed this, but flowers come in a wide variety of colors and shapes. And part of the reason for that is that different flowers get pollinated by different kinds of pollinators in general. And those different shapes and colors will often be for either a wide variety of pollinators or one particular kind of pollinator. Maybe some flowers are only pollinated by bees. Maybe some flowers are only pollinated by a specific small group of bees. Some flowers might be pollinated by flies specifically. So the idea that flowers have specific or different shapes and colors to attract different kinds of pollinators and have relationships with different kinds of animals, that's called a floral syndrome. So say a magenta flower that is somewhat tube-shaped, like this Gulf penstemon, that tube-shaped magenta-colored flower, that's one floral syndrome, right? And another floral syndrome would, of course, be this wide, open yellow flower. This looks like it is lance-leaf coreopsis. That's going to attract a different group of pollinators, or perhaps sometimes a wider group of pollinators. So that's a totally different floral syndrome than this is. And of course, there are a lot of overlapping floral syndromes. Now, I could sit and list what each one of the floral syndromes is for, but here, I'm gonna zoom in on something I printed up from the Fish and Wildlife Service for y'all, and you can see how white, purple, and green flowers might attract one group of pollinators, while bright white, yellow, blue, or brightly UV. Now, you and I can't see UV, but a lot of pollinators like butterflies and bees can see in the ultraviolet range. White and green flowers, scarlet, orange, red, or white, bright red and purple, pale or dark brown purple. You can see how there are different sets of colors and even shapes that attract different pollinators. If you want to stop the video and read that, you are more than welcome. This is not complete by any means because there are a wide variety of different kinds of flowers across the world and a wide variety of different kinds of pollinators. Even if we just look at bees, there are hundreds and hundreds of different species of bees around the world who may live in very different ways. Now, I invite you to come to our wildflower gardens here at the Nature Discovery Center and look for pollinators yourself, but I thought I would walk around and see if we can identify some pollinators. I've been seeing mostly bees today, different species of bees. Oh, by the way, I did want to give a shout out to the Native Plant Society of Texas Clear Lake chapter for giving us a grant for $400 to help buy plants for this and other wildflower gardens here at the Nature Center. By the way, we plant native, and the reason why we plant native regional plants from this part of Texas is because the animals who live here are going to be able to interact with these plants better than plants from other countries or even from other parts of the country. I love orange California poppies, but I wouldn't plant them here because there's probably fewer things that know how to interact with them in this part of the country. Let's see if we can zoom in. A flower fly has been visiting this butterweed. Now, as soon as I zoomed in, she flew off. You can see some very tiny sweat bees visiting some of these flowers as well. Oh, there's the flower fly on the left. That's one of the calligraphers, which is a kind of flower fly. They're in the hoverfly family. We're zooming around, looking at some other flowers. Let's see if we can find anything else. I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit. I've seen a lot of honeybees. Speaking of unique floral syndromes, there's a very unique flower shape right here. The disc part of the flower is a big cone, and this is the Mexican hat or the upright prairie coneflower. This is one of my favorite flowers here. They're very unique looking. Of course, there's the state flower of Texas, the Texas bluebonnet. You may not know this, but there are 6 different species of flowers that people call bluebonnets. And when the state of Texas named a state wildflower, they just said in that piece of legislation, they just said bluebonnet. So technically, we have 6 different species of wildflower that are our state wildflower. Now, that flower, it's a kind of lupine, and it actually takes a little bit of effort to get into it. So it's not something that every pollinator can visit. As I told you before, some flowers are more wide open, and when they're wider and they have a bigger landing platform, there are more different kinds of pollinators that can visit that. Here's a very popular plant with pollinators. This is Texas lantana. You see a lot of bees and butterflies on this flower right here. I'm gonna try to zoom in and out slowly so that I don't make anybody dizzy or, or give you motion sickness or something like that. We're gonna walk around our wildflower garden. We're not gonna do this endlessly, obviously. I do invite you to go out to your own garden and see how many different kinds of pollinators you can find. We're visiting some of this Gulf Coast or Brazos penstemon again. You notice that there's sort of a deep cup to this flower. So some large pollinators may not be able to fit into that. So what some pollinators do is they go to the base of the flower, they cut it open, and they drink the nectar out, and then they fly away. That's called nectar robbing. We see carpenter bees do that a lot, and some other large bees like bumblebees. One of the things that's not quite blooming yet that we're hoping will bloom soon are the coral beans, which I was very happy to notice did survive the freeze. I can see this stalk right here in the middle is starting to come up, and we can see perhaps some red flowers coming out on that. Now, red tube-shaped flowers are a floral syndrome that is mostly visited by hummingbirds. So hummingbirds, as we know, love the color red. They're attracted to red tube-shaped flowers, and long tubes, especially very long tube-shaped flowers, really can only be pollinated by hummingbirds. There aren't many things that have a proboscis or a mouth or a beak big enough to go down into some of these flowers. It's only hummingbirds that can do that. Well, it doesn't look like we have a ton of other things out today. If you see these large bees that look like bumblebees, I've been seeing a lot of these recently, but the abdomen, the back part, is bare. It's not furry. Those are carpenter bees. If the whole body is furry, that's a bumblebee. Most of the bees that are going to visit your garden, it seems like the most common bees around here are honeybees. So you most likely, if you have flowers in your own garden, you most likely have honeybees visiting your garden. And the carpenter bees seem to like making holes in wooden fence posts and in other wooden structures. That's what they make their nests in, is dead wood. So it's very possible that if you have anything made out of wood near your house, that you also have carpenter bees. Well, everybody, thanks for joining me today and learning a little bit about pollinators and pollination. Again, I invite you to come out to the Nature Discovery Center sometime soon and see if you can find some pollinators out here yourself. Head out into your own garden and look. Next week, we're going to talk about trees, and I'll take you around the Nature Center and identify some trees for you. One thing I did want to show you before we leave today is that our Lindheimer's bee blossom, Gaura, is covered with aphids and ladybugs. I don't know if that's zooming in, but if I kind of look around this plant, earlier I could see all these little red spots. And the ladybugs are eating the aphids, of course. Ladybugs are occasional pollinators, but really that's usually accidental. Most of the time, ladybugs are preying on smaller insects. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a lovely day. The weather's nice. Head outside, look at some wildflowers, and see if you can find some pollinators. Goodbye, everyone.